Okay, so let's have a look at how we write and how we say the present simple tense. So let's have a look at the grammar rules. So how we write this tense. The positive form, so we start with the subject. So I, you, he, she, it, all of those. And then the verb. Now, with the present simple, what you need to remember is if you're talking about he or she or it, then we have to add s to the verb. For the other ones, it doesn't matter. You don't change it. But don't forget, you need s on the end for he, she, and it. For the irregular verbs, you don't need to do anything. So it's a little bit easier. Now the negatives, so we still start with the subject, but now we need to use don't or doesn't. So don't forget, don't is do not and doesn't is does not. But when we write it and when we say it, we make it shorter. Don't and doesn't. And the verb, this is easy. You don't do anything to it. So you don't need to worry about he or she or it. You don't change the verb. And the same is for the irregular verbs as well. So this one's a little bit easier. If you want to ask a question, a positive question, then we need to start the question with do or does. And then you have the subject. And again, the verb, don't change it. Just leave it as it is, right up from the dictionary. And the positive questions for irregular verbs are exactly the same. If you're doing a negative question, then we just start it with don't or doesn't. And then you have the subject and the verb again in the base form, so don't need to change it. So the good thing is that when we're talking about negatives and questions using the present simple, there are no irregular verbs. You don't need to worry about irregular verbs. But the most important thing to remember is this he, she, and it. So don't forget, add s to the verb for the positive form for he, she, and it. And then if you're using he, she, and it in the negative or in the questions, then we need to use does or doesn't. So he does, she does, or he doesn't, she doesn't, it doesn't. So those are the things to remember when it comes to the grammar rules. Okay, so let's have a look at the spelling rules. There are some things you need to learn about writing the present simple. If you've got a verb that ends in a Y, then usually what we do is we take the Y off, and now we don't put S, we put IES. So you need to add some extra letters. So hurry becomes hurries, and try becomes tries. Now if the verbs end in double S, or in SH or CH or TCH, and there are some verbs that end in X, then usually what we do is we put an ES at the end of the verb for the present simple. Again, this is just for he, she, and it. Don't forget that. So watch becomes watches, or catch becomes catches, and pass becomes passes. Now, some verbs in English, just the small ones, they end in O. Now, you know two of the verbs are very well known. You know these ones, go and do. So what we do here is we have to put ES at the end, not just S. So it's ES, so go becomes goes, and do becomes does. So remember, with do, you change the spelling, but you also have to change how you say it. Do becomes does with the present simple. And the last rule here, if the verb ends with a vowel, Now don't forget, vowels are A, E, I, O, and U. So any of those vowels, and then you have the letter Y, then usually what we do in English with the spelling is we just add S. So we don't change the Y. The Y stays there. We just put S after it. So play becomes plays, and buy becomes buys, and say becomes says. Right, so let's have a look at how we use the present simple. The first way we use it is when we're talking about things that are true or false, and also general facts. So everyday general facts and truths and things like that. So you've got some examples there. I like tea. Or the example there, the sun rises in the east. You know, that's a scientific fact. So we use the present simple for that. So what you can do now, have a think of some other sentences, write them down if you want, pause this recording, have a look at the sentences, write them down, think of your own, and then have a look at the examples that I'm going to give you. Okay, so here are some examples. There you go. My sister lives in Devon. That's the truth. That's a fact. I visit my grandparents every weekend. You know, so that's like a routine. It's something that we do all the time. They work in an office, and water boils at 100 degrees centigrade. That's a scientific fact. So these are all examples of how we use the present simple for truths and everyday facts. Okay, so the next way that we use the present simple is when we're giving instructions or directions. I'm sure there's been times when you first came to the UK and you were trying to find the way to the post office, or somebody might have asked you how to get somewhere. Well, we use the present simple for this. And also, the thing we use it all the time is when you're cooking. So when you're doing, looking at a recipe, you know, for making a new meal or making a cake or something, then the instructions that you have in the cookbook, those are going to be in the present simple. So you've got examples there. There's giving directions. So turn left at the end of the road. So the verb there is turn. And the other one, stir the curry and then add the spices. So we've got two verbs there, stir and then add. So both of those verbs, the present simple because it's giving instructions and directions. So do the same thing again. Try and think of some other sentences that you could use. Pause the presentation and then have a look at my answers after. So here are some answers. There we go. Your teacher might say to you, sit down and open your books. You know, that's an instruction. Or in a recipe, it could say wait 10 minutes and then add more salt. Or go straight on and take the second left. There's a direction. Read the story and answer the questions. That's instructions. Sometimes your teacher might say it, or they might send it to you in an email, or it's in the book. Or don't touch. The paint is wet. So all of those, all of the verbs, they're underlined there. They're all using the present simple. Okay, now, the other way that we use the present simple, when your English is a little bit better, you can use the present simple to talk about the future. So the name of the tense is the present simple, but we do use it to talk about future arrangements. So usually if it has a time, if it tells us when something is happening in the future, you can use the present simple. You've got an example there. My bus leaves at 5:30 p.m. Well, that's not now. That's not the present. That's in the future. But we're using the present simple for this. So it's a very useful tense. So see if you can think of some other things, other examples of future arrangements. Don't forget, you need to have a time in your sentence. Pause the presentation, write them down, and then restart and have a look at my examples. So here we got some examples. So we fly to Paris on Sunday. So that's in the future. So it's telling us when. The train arrives at 4 p.m. Does this lesson finish at 12:30 p.m.? So this is a question, but it's still talking about a time in the future. College doesn't start in August and the bus doesn't leave at 2 p.m. So the present simple can be used to talk about the future, even though its name is the present simple. But the thing to remember is you must say when in the future. Okay, so we've looked at how we spell the present simple and how we use the present simple. So let's finish off with how we say the present simple. Now the present simple is similar to the past simple in the way we say the verbs, because it sometimes depends on the ending of the verb you want to use. So if we look at the first ones, if when you say the verb it's got a hard sound at the end of it, so possibly there's a letter K or a P or a T or an F, if that's at the end of the verb and when you say the verb it's got a hard sound like K or P or T or F, then what we do is the S that you've written for he, she and it, we say it as an S. So that's the easy one. So you've got the examples there. Stop becomes stops, and pick becomes picks. Hate, hates. Laugh, laughs, and put, puts. So you can hear there's an S sound. But sometimes at the end of the verb you've got possibly CH or SH, or there's CE or SE or ZE. Now all of those endings, they all sound very similar. Or if you've got the verb and it ends in a DGE. Now this time the S that you put at the end of the verb, we don't say it like an S. What we do now is we say is. And you've got the examples there, like touch. So touch ends, the verb ends with a CH. So now the ending, we say touches. And wash becomes washes. Close becomes closes. Judge becomes judges. And then practice becomes practices. So you can hear that it's an is sound at the end of the verb when you're saying it. Now the last ones, this time, if the verb ends in another consonant, and don't forget, consonants are the letters of the alphabet that are not vowels, or it might have a consonant, but it sounds like a vowel, then what we do is the S letter, we say it like it's a Z, Z sound. Z. It's a little bit more difficult. Sometimes it's very difficult to hear. So you've got this example there. So pull becomes pulls. It's not pulse. It's a Z, pulls. Run becomes runs. Love becomes loves. Learn is learns. And fly, now look at this one. So the verb fly ends with a Y, but it sounds like an I. Fly. So this time fly becomes flies. You can hear it's a Z sound, not an S. Now the the best way to learn these is just by listening. The more you listen to English, the better you will be when you can hear people using the present simple. They say the verbs, you can hear the different endings, the S or the Z or the Z sound. So the more you listen, the better you get. And then as you get better at this, then you can start saying it yourself.